Welcome back to The Explainer. I'm so thrilled to have you here today because, well, we're stepping right into a massive historical detective story. Today, we're digging deep into the ancient Egyptian terminology used in biblical texts, and we're going to see how it actually holds up to the intense scrutiny of modern archaeology and linguistics. If you love ancient texts and getting to the absolute bottom of long-held historical mysteries, you are going to love the journey we're on today.
So, let's just get right to the elephant in the room and ask the central question that sparks this entire investigation. Did the Torah make a massive historical blunder? For years, this specific question has sparked some truly intense debate. We're going to look at the linguistic evidence, the hard archaeological timelines, and the textual clues to figure out exactly what happened.
Section 1. The correction claim.
Okay, here's the setup that illustrates the core tension perfectly. There's a popular modern argument claiming that the Quran, written in the 7th century CE, actually achieved a historical correction. How? By using the generic Arabic term Malik, which just means king, to describe the Egyptian ruler during the time of Joseph. The argument suggests that the Torah completely blundered by anachronistically using the very specific term Paro, or Pharaoh, throughout both the Genesis narratives of Joseph and the Exodus narratives of Moses. The claim is basically that the word Pharaoh wasn't used as a personal title back then, making the Torah historically inaccurate.
Which brings us to Section 2. The evolution of Pharaoh.
Let's look at how this word actually evolved. The original Egyptian term is pra-ah, which literally translates to great house. Now, during the Old Kingdom, this strictly referred to a physical location, the palace precinct itself. By the Middle Kingdom, it evolved slightly to mean the court bureaucracy. But then, by the mid-18th dynasty, this absolutely incredible semantic shift happened. The great house physically shifted from being a building to being a person. It became a personal epithet for the monarch himself. Imagine if we suddenly started calling the President of the United States the White House as their actual personal name, right? That is exactly the scale of the linguistic shift we're talking about here.
And we don't just have to guess about this. The late, truly legendary Egyptologist Sir Alan Gardner, who's basically one of the premier authorities on the Egyptian language, meticulously traced this exact evolution. He confirmed that Per-Ka became a personal title addressing the monarch during that crucial mid-18th dynasty period. The term literally stopped being a place and started being the ruler.
Section 3. The Moses Timeline Match.
So, the crucial anchor point in our mystery is the year 1479 BCE. Why that specific year? Well, because this marks the start of the joint co-regency of the Egyptian rulers Thutmose III and Hatshepsut. This is a highly critical moment in ancient Near Eastern history that sets up our entire timeline.
And here is why that date is the absolute smoking gun. The highly respected German Egyptologist Prof. Jürgen von Beckeraff meticulously documents in his handbook on royal titles that the very first recorded instance of Pharaoh being used to directly address the king occurs during this exact joint co-regency. This aligns perfectly with the early date timeline of Moses. Let that sink in. During the exact era Moses would have been standing in the Egyptian court, Pharaoh was the precise spoken address of the day.
And this isn't just some isolated coincidence either. Prof. James K. Hoffmeyer, an archaeologist who has worked extensively out in the Sinai, confirms that the author of Exodus was writing with native, first-hand familiarity of this specific New Kingdom vocabulary. The text reflects the exact, intimate language of the 15th to 13th centuries BCE. It's the language of an eyewitness, completely consistent with someone who was deeply steeped in the contemporary royal court.
Now, you might be wondering, wait, what about the book of Genesis, right? If the title Pharaoh became a personal address during the time of Moses, why is it used for rulers during the much earlier times of Abraham and Joseph? Prof. Kenneth Kitchen explains this brilliantly as a standard literary anachronism. Think about it. An author living in the New Kingdom era, like Moses, retroactively applies the contemporary title Pharaoh to past rulers, so his current readers immediately understand who he's talking about. It's done for absolute clarity. It was a completely normal ancient scribal convention.
Moving on to Section 4. The Torah's Linguistic Nuance.
Here is where it gets really brilliant. The Hebrew text doesn't just blindly slap the word Pharaoh everywhere. No, it alternates with surgical precision between two distinct terms. When the ruler is executing official state acts, national legislation, or big geopolitical moves, the text uses Melech Mitzrayim, the formal Semitic title meaning King of Egypt. But when the text zooms in on the ruler's individual actions, his personal obstinacy, and his ego, especially during those intense confrontations with Moses, it switches to Paro. It captures the dual nature of the Egyptian monarch absolutely perfectly.
And classical Jewish commentators actually caught on to this nuance centuries ago.
The 12th century scholar Abraham ibn Ezra recognized that Pharaoh was a dynamic title of honor, not a personal birth name. He actually compared it to how the Romans used the title Caesar. It was an office and an honorific, inherently tied to the cultural reality of Egypt rather than just some abstract geopolitical label.
This all aligns flawlessly with the ancient Talmudic principle of Lashon B'nai Adam, which translates to the language of men. This principle states that the Torah speaks in the contemporary idiom of its generation. Basically, Moses updated the obsolete older Middle Kingdom titles when writing down the Genesis narratives, replacing them with the current 18th and 19th dynasty word Pharaoh so that the fleeing Israelites would clearly understand him. It's just brilliant communication, ensuring the message landed powerfully with its intended ancient audience.
Section 5. The Final Verdict.
So what does this all mean when we put the pieces together? Based on the linguistic and archaeological data, the scholarly verdict is incredibly clear. The claim that the 7th century CE Arabic word Malik is some sort of Egyptological correction completely lacks historical context. Malik is simply a generic term meaning king, which actually reflects a later misunderstanding of 2nd millennium BCE Egyptian titular development. The Hebrew text, on the other hand, preserves authentic late Bronze Age court distinctions. It uses both the formal geopolitical title and the highly specific, historically dynamic Egyptian court title. It reveals a profound native intimacy with the actual time period.
Which leaves us with one final major paradigm shift to end today's explainer. If the Hebrew text perfectly matches the late Bronze Age Egyptian court reality, who is actually correcting whom? What was framed for years as a textual error turns out to be a brilliant, surgically precise marker of historical authenticity. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I really hope this leaves you completely inspired to dig even deeper into the context of these ancient texts.